Alright, so I'm going to try to do an assembly video on this thing. It's raining, so I'm trying not to, let it get wet, but I got to do a video, so it's going to have to get installed on this truck. So there'll be a lot of pausing and restarting, but the bottom line is that this is what you'll get in the package. There's some things that'll be shipped separate from the base ramp itself, like the hardware here, and then the two Dovetail ends. Those will be shipped separate, but this piece here and then the two ramp sections will be shipped all in one box. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the Dovetail bracket, which installs in the receiver hitch. So that piece is this here. So we'll grab that, and we will also grab a 5/8 bolt. If you look inside of here, instead of installing a pin, this bolt will fit there. The bolt's the same size as a regular pin, but it allows for a little more stability. So we'll install that part. I'm trying to do this with one hand while I'm working. Let me see if I can get these lights turned on here. That's a little more helpful. Alright, so I'll do the best that I can to keep everything in focus. I just keep having trouble with this, I dropped it, with this focus here. But so instead of having a pin that installs here, there'll be a bolt. So you just kind of gotta get this set in or out, one or the other. Looks like about here. I'm sorry if the camera's a little shaky. I'm trying to do this with one hand. I guess I'm gonna have to pause it. Alright, so I got it in there. And I just kind of threaded in a little bit, just a couple threads, just to make sure it doesn't pull out. It's still very loose, just like any other receiver hitch would be. If you put it in there, there's some wobble. Obviously, we don't want that at the end, but it allows us to try to make sure everything's tight. So that's the first part. The second part here is the neck that installs on the Dovetail itself. So we'll grab this, and on my truck personally, this mark here is where it needs to be, and it is one of these. I think this hole here that puts it at the right height. Your truck is going to be different, obviously. Our measurements are similar, but they're not exact. So there is enough room as far as adjustment is concerned for you to kind of do what you need to do. So you just drop this in here. And it just drops in freely. And then you will thread in this 5/8 bolt on this side. That's what I get for trying to watch the camera instead of what I'm doing. So in this application, again, for my truck, I've already marked my hole or my line, so I'm going to set that, and then I'm going to crank it down, and I'll bring you back. Alright, so I use a Milwaukee Impact. There's Ryobis, there's all kinds of different kinds, but I use this one. Impact actually helps because you kind of only have one hand while you're working. This entire thing was kind of designed in order to be able to be installed with one person, so it's kind of hard to install it and film at the same time, but I'm going to do the best that I can. I previously explained that I made some lines for myself to explain where my mounting point is. Obviously on your truck it'll be different, but I'm going to go ahead and crank this down where it needs to be, and then I'll bring you back. Alright, so I did crank this bolt down, but this bolt is still loose. Okay, so I'm going to go grab the Dovetail part of it. I'm going to put the camera on a tripod and then I'll try to bring you in close as I start to install. I'm really doing the best that I can here. So I'm going to take this piece here, and I am going to install it on the dovetail neck, which is right here. So I'll try to keep this as tight as I can as far as the shots are concerned, but at this point, this piece here is still loose. This piece is kind of cranked down a little bit just to make sure that the height is right. Again, this is for my truck. Your truck will be different. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the dovetail now and sit it in place. Okay, so the way that this has to install is there are two bolt holes that are in the dovetail neck, and that's where the adjustment part is here. So I know this video is not very clear, but basically what you want to do is you want to kind of get it set, you know, where the gap is maybe closed, or as close to closed as you can get it anyway. And then you're gonna pop your bolts in. So let's see. Again, I'm trying to do this with with one hand here. So I'll take the nuts off here on that one and this one. I figure if I can do this with one hand while I'm videoing, it's got to help me in my sales, right? So you can put them in from either side. It doesn't really matter. I kind of put them in from this side here. So there's this one, and there's this one, and you'll have to kind of wiggle this thing here until they line up. This one seemed to have went in fine here. This one needs to get popped in, so I'll wiggle it a little bit to get it in there. You can see it doesn't take very much effort to get those two in there. So I'll take these nuts and put them in place. They won't be cranked down yet, but they'll be at least threaded in place on these here. So again, I'm sorry for the maybe the redundant speaking and out of focus stuff. I'm just trying to get all this stuff done at one time here. So basically, you'll just want to kind of get it snugged up, you know, just by finger. You don't have to tighten it up all the way yet. And again, you know, I use an impact. You can just as easily use a ratchet. So at this point, we have this piece tightened up, but this piece is loose. And also, the dovetail is loose. And what that allows you to do is kind of move it around, slide it forward or backward as you need it. So what you'll try to do now is you'll try to bump it up against the bed of the truck as far as you can. And this is going to require two hands. That gap is pretty well closed, but I try to close it almost as much as, all the way, basically, as much as I can. And there's more than enough room to be able to do that. So I'm going to put this on the tripod here, and I'll try to, you know, maybe pull back on this here and push that forward at the same time. Okay, so that gap is pretty well closed now. So what I'll do is I'll crank down the two bolts that hold the dovetail to the dovetail neck. So I'm just going to crank those down now. Okay, so now the gap is pretty much gone. But again, the actual receiver part is still loose, right? So you can see it moves back and forth, but the gap for the most part is pretty well closed, and it's pretty well even. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank down on the bolt that holds it into the hitch itself, and it's the same 5/8 bolt. All right, so now that's tight. So essentially at this point everything should be pretty tight to the point where you can wiggle the entire truck by trying to move the dovetail. But what you'll find is that there'll be more reveal here than there is here. Now every truck is different, every hitch is different, so there's not a whole lot I can do about that. What I've decided to do though is to use 1/2" bolts with nuts welded in here. And the idea is that if you tighten the bolt up, it pitches it this way. And I've had good luck with that, so I'm going to do that part now. All right, so what I got is 2 1/2" bolts here. If this thing will focus. I can't. I have no luck with this stuff. The first one is going to go in the first hole up here. And this will be the one that adjusts. Now, if when I install this one, and it depends on the truck, you know, if this has to go up higher, you might miss it with this bolt, but hit it with this bolt. You still want to crank this bolt down because this will kind of stop the neck from falling down in an emergency. You shouldn't really have any issues, but if you do, you know, this will help at least a little bit. And I do kind of recommend that once you get this installed and set where you want it, either drill a hole in this neck and install a pin, or, you know, use this as an adjustment bolt and then drill through this one and put a pin in here. That'll kind of hold it as far as the weight's concerned, and then this will be able to hold it for adjustment. So I'm going to do that part now, and then when I do, you'll notice that the reveals will kind of go away. All right, so I haven't done anything yet. You can see, you know, the kind of the reveal between the truck bed on that side and the truck bed on this side. It's definitely uneven. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crank down on this bolt here, and it should pull everything straight. That didn't go as planned. And then I'm going to crank down on this one down here, and if it hits it, great. If it doesn't, I'm just going to crank it down anyway. All right, so that one did the same thing. So the bottom line is now when you look at this, it's pretty well even across. So you got about the same amount of space there on that lip as you do on this lip. And it may be a little off. If it is, you can use ratchet straps and go around your bumper, grab it here and maybe here or something, and crank them in place. In fact, I recommend you do that anyway, just for some added stability. But for the most part, it's pretty straight now. So now the dovetail is installed and all of these structural parts are tight. So what's next is we got to put the dovetail ends on there and here, and I'm going to do that now. So we got two. We got one here and we got one there. This is the passenger side, that's the driver's side. So I'll grab the passenger side and I will put it in place. Again, I really apologize if this is wobbly and stuff. I'm not really a very good video guy. So you just got to line up the holes that are drilled in place, and you drop the 1/2" bolts in those locations, and the same goes for that side. Same goes with this one. Just got to line the bolts up and get them in place. And there'll be 4 1/2" 3-inch long bolts, which will come in the hardware kit. See here. And what you'll got to do, you have to do, whatever, you know what I mean, is you'll put in this one here in the front, this one here in the front. And the reason why you're going to leave these, you're going to put the bolts in, but you're going to leave the nuts off. And the reason why is because that's where the light bar mounts. So, let's see here. Let's get the nuts off of these here and get these dropped in. So that's one. You can put them up from the bottom too, you know, if you have not enough clearance in your bumper. You know, if this is really tight for you and you see the bolt sticking down and maybe it hits your bumper, you can kind of put them in from the bottom going upwards and then put the nuts on this side here. I've had that issue before. I don't think you'll have that issue with the 150, but if you do, you know, at least you know the way to remedy that. So I'll put these two in, just the two front ones, and that kind of holds it at least in place. And then obviously you'll take the other ones, do the same thing. Let's see here. That one in place, and same on the other side. Come on now. I'm not holding this camera right or anything. Sorry, guys. So that one's in place. So basically what you got on the Dovetail is two bolts hanging out. So you'll leave the nuts off of the ones that are closest to the back, which is this one here and this one here. But you'll want to put the nuts on the front ones. And the easiest way to do that is to push these up a little and grab this nut, put it underneath, and then use a ratchet or an impact to, you know, to thread it and crank it down. So I'm going to do that part now. Alright, so I'm going to hold the nut in place under here, and I'm going to use the impact gun from the top and crank this bolt down. I'll do the same thing on the other side. So those sections are at least tight. So I'm going to leave the nuts off of this section here, and I'm going to go get the light bar and install it. Now when I put the bar on, you're going to notice that the lights are not on there. When you get the ramp, the lights will be there. But I'm just going to install the bar at this point. So, and actually I'm wrong. The lights will not be on the light bar when you get it. They'll be in a box full of hardware. You'll have to install the lights on the bar first. And I'll have a separate section of that. That's kind of self-explanatory. I really shouldn't need to do a video on that. I think you'll get the idea. But this is the bar, and this is how it installs. You'll need to make sure that the bracket parts that bolt to the Dovetail are justified more forward, and this is the position it needs to install underneath. So you just got to pop it in on this one, same thing on the other side, and just hold it up while you start your bolts, which is not really difficult. That's one side, this is the other. And then just use something, a ratchet or an impact, to crank it down. This in place too. And so that's tight. So the lights will be here, obviously. And that's the the hardest part of the install. The rest of it is just installing the ramp. So I will take you over to it, which is here, and I'll explain to you the difference between one and the other. Now, the bottom section here is the first part of the ramp that has to get installed. That's the part that has the hinge or the latch pins, and it has hinges on both ends. One here and one here. So if you look here, you'll see that this part of the bifold ramp is attached to these hinges. This part looks like there's nothing attached. This is the section that connects to the dovetail. So I'm going to do that part now. Alright, so you can see this is the first part of the ramp. This is the part that has the drop down feet, the legs, hinges on the bottom, hinges on the top. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is make sure that your feet are upwards and not downwards. And those bottom hinges connect here. And obviously on that side. So I'm going to do that part now while I'm videoing, so that you can see that it is possible to do with one person, though it's preferable to do it with two. That's slid in place all the way over, as far as you can that way. Drop one of the pins in. Doesn't matter which side, this side or the other side. So just make sure it's up there. And then, I'm going to get you off of this tripod here. I hope I don't have to do this in 2 videos. But, so now you'll see the hinges have threaded bolts on the ends. So you'll go to your hardware kit or pack or whatever it is, and you'll grab 2 of the cups and 4 of the nuts. Okay, so you got 1 cup, 2 cup, 4 nuts. So you grab them and you grab the cups, and cups go on here, 1 there, and 1 here. On the 48-inch ramps, I only do 1 per side, but on the 60s they're a little wider, so I kind of try to do some extra. All right, so you'll put on the first nut for each hinge, and what you're going to try to do is get it as tight as you can and still be able to spin this piece. The reason why is because you want the hinge to be able to go up and down without binding, right? So, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can have a little bit of slack there, but you're going to want to be able to spin this. And then once you're sure you're there, you put the other one on there, crank it down, well, finger tight, I guess. And then you're going to need 2 9/16 wrenches. Let's see here. This one's a little too tight. So now you'll need 2 9/16 wrenches. Hold this nut in place, crank this one down against it. Hold this nut in place, crank this one down against it. I know I'm not the greatest camera guy, people. I'm doing the best I can here, but hopefully this translates to video. Let's see here. So I've already explained, you gotta hold one of them and tighten the other one down. So we'll hold that and then crank that one down. And if you can't spin that cup, you need to loosen it up a little bit and do it again. So let's see here. That should do it. That cup still spins. And and that cup stays down. So the idea is to use the outer nut as a lock nut, so that you can kind of, you know, put the hinge pins tight, but not so tight. Zoom in, zoom out, sorry. Not so tight that the ramp wants to bind when it goes up and down. And these upper hinges are basically the same way. This one here, that one there, it'll be the same thing. So I'm gonna go grab that part of it now. It's actually sitting right there. And I'll install that piece. So, put you back on the tripod. And then try to level you up a little bit. All right, that should do. So, that one's much easier to install because it's up high, and you don't have to try to bend down while you're doing it. So you'll grab the other 2 cups and the other 4 nuts, come in the hardware kit. And same as the other thing. Put the cups on, and then put 2 nuts each hinge. So, I'm sorry if I'm making you sick. Cup 1, cup 2, and then nuts and nuts. This one seems to be giving me hell. Doesn't seem to want to take the, wasn't freely thread on there. This one here seems to be fine. So they'll do the same thing. You'll want to crank it down, but enough that you can still spin this cup without being able to move it back and forth a bunch. And you'll do the same thing on that side. And then again, you're going to take another nut and lock this one here, if I can do it properly, this one here in place, so that you can still spin this, but these nuts won't come off. And you'll do the same thing on this side. Alright, so I got my wrenches in hand. So you're able to spin this cup without having too much play. You got to put 1 wrench here, 1 wrench there, and crank this one down against this one. Okay, so for the most part, the ramp is now installed. Obviously, it's taking a lot longer because I'm trying to video it, and you know, you'll have to plug your lights into your harness, but it is definitely straight up and down, and I will demonstrate putting it up and down for you, because obviously, if you're going to have this permanently installed, it probably wouldn't hurt to have some kind of gorilla lifts, but it's not necessary. I don't have them on mine. I'll show you how I lift them up and put them down, and hopefully that helps you a little bit. So, here we go. Okay, so grab here, and here, bring it down. Make sure your feet are planted on the ground straight up and down. As long as that's done, all of the support that you need will be there. It looks like they're on an angle right now, but I promise you they're straight up and down. And that's the way that I drop it. Obviously, you know, you'll learn. Okay, so the other thing that you need to know about this, and I guess you'll be using a 48-inch stander mower with this, when you start to go up the ramp, this section and this section will not really move at all, even if the truck starts to go down. So what you'll do is you're going to go up the ramp, everything's going to be fine. When you get to about here with the front wheels, the truck will start to squat a little bit. And that'll give you some extra clearance here, though you shouldn't need it, because if you look at the pitch, you'll notice that I don't think you're going to have too many issues with the ramp pitch. Each part of the ramp is a different pitch. This is a different degree than this, and that's a different degree than all of them. And what that does is allows the overall height to be distributed over 3 different angles and prevent your deck from scraping up there and on the way down. So also I put the largest part of the incline here so that right in the beginning, if there's any issues, you notice it before you get up so far that you get yourself into trouble. You're not going to have any problems though. The incline is right. So that's how you put it down. I'm going to show you how I put it up. Obviously, there's not really a whole lot of scientific tricks to putting this thing up, but the way that I've decided to do it, when I first built my first ramp, I did have this center section here open, and the reason why I did that is because I wanted to be able to walk straight up the center and lift it up from here without having to bend all the way over. Nobody has bought any of the ramps that were designed like that. Everybody buys them the way they are here. So I'll show you how I put mine up. Again, if you have a gorilla lift or something, then it'll be much easier. But this makes it so that you don't have a whole lot of fatigue if you have to lift it up a bunch of times without a gorilla lift. Grab here, and just lift it up so it stands by itself. And then you take your hands and lift it up here. That prevents you from having to bend all the way over to pick your ramp up and then have the follow through of having to pick it all the way up from the ground and then install the hinges. This way you never bend all the way over. And that's about it. You'll probably still have some questions. You may have some issues with it getting it tight. Again, I still recommend, even though it's not really necessary, and I'll put this here on the stand and show you. I can shake the entire truck with the stability of the ramp. I'm kind of hoping the photo or the video will translate this. So, still, even though it's very tight and very sturdy, and most of the support comes from the legs dropping, because when the legs drop halfway down the ramp, it actually helps to stabilize even the dovetail. But still, you may feel maybe you may feel a little worried about whether or not it's stable, whether it's tight, whether or not you want some extra protection. I do, and I would probably with this 60-inch do some kind of ratchet straps. I am working on a different design, but that design I feel like I'm going to patent, which will prevent all of that stuff and still fit on every truck and still will sell for the same price and all the other awesome stuff. But in the meantime, until I get that one right, I still use ratchet straps. One on this side here, one on that side there, and I just go around the bumper, from the back side and the front, and just, hook them onto these pieces of expanded metal, you'll want to go as close to the end of the dovetail as you can to still give yourself the deck clearance that you need. And then just crank down one side and the other until it's even. And then, you know, I'd be willing to bet you don't have any troubles going forward. So that is the install video. That's how it works. And I appreciate the patronage, man. And if you have any issues, please give me a call or send me an email. I have all of these measurements pretty well nailed down. So if a replacement part needs to be made, or if there's some kind of an issue, I can get it taken care of for you and sent out to you. And that should be it, man. So I appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing your comments and and some feedback. Everybody kind of gives me feedback on whatever ramp I sell. I don't usually publish the results because most of the time they're people who buy them are not people who buy them off of YouTube. It's somebody who has got it off of Marketplace from Facebook or Craigslist or OfferUp. So I don't really post the feedback, but I do use these. I didn't design this just because it was fun. I designed it because I needed it. And so every time I come across an issue, I fix it, and it translates into the next set of ramps I build. So this should be shipping out tomorrow before the end of the day, and hopefully in 2 to 3 days, the guy who ordered it will have it. And then I'm on to this one here, which is a 48-inch that I have not finished yet. This is kind of a, it was a, you know, like a stock ramp, one that I just was building to build, but I've sold it, so now I got to finish it. So that one will go out a week after this one here. But anyway, that's that. I know it's a long video. I'm sorry. I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to chop it down. It just is what it is. And I'll see you on the next one.